This story proves that ignoring warnings never works out, especially when the warning shows up 10 times in a row. And boy, things escalated quickly. At the time, Egypt was basically the most powerful startup in the ancient world. Everything worked. Food production, stable. Infrastructure, impressive. Labor force, massive. Confidence level, unhealthy. From the outside, it looked like a perfectly optimized system. Smooth operations, strong leadership, and a ruler who genuinely believed nothing could go wrong. A key detail, though, the whole system depended on one thing staying exactly the same forever. No one was allowed to leave. The Israelites were the invisible workforce holding everything together. They built, produced, maintained, and carried the weight of the economy while never being part of the benefits. As long as they stayed where they were, Egypt ran like clockwork. The moment they stopped, the illusion cracked, which is why the request that arrives next feels so small, and yet so dangerous. Enter Moses. He doesn't show up as a conquering hero. No dramatic entrance, no army, no threats. He comes in as a messenger, calm, direct, almost polite. He asks for something simple. Let the people go. Pharaoh hears this and, internally, reacts the same way a CEO reacts when an employee casually asks for a permanent vacation during peak season. The answer is immediate. Absolutely not. From Pharaoh's point of view, this isn't cruelty, it's management. Control is leadership. Stability means keeping everything exactly where it is. If he gives in once, the whole system might start asking questions, and questions lead to problems. So Pharaoh does what he's always done, he ignores the warning. In his mind, this will pass. Maybe Moses will give up. Maybe the problem will resolve itself. Maybe if he pretends hard enough that he didn't hear anything, reality will cooperate. Spoiler, it does not. Because Moses doesn't argue, he doesn't negotiate, he doesn't raise his voice. He simply delivers the message and waits. Calmly, almost uncomfortably calmly. The kind of calm that makes people nervous because it suggests confidence. This creates the central dilemma of the story. If Pharaoh lets the people go, he loses control, power, and the system he's built his identity around. If he refuses, he risks consequences he doesn't fully understand yet. One option threatens his authority, the other threatens everything else. Naturally, he chooses the option that has always worked before. No, from the outside, it still looks fine. Egypt is strong, Pharaoh is confident. Nothing has exploded yet. No one is panicking. This still feels like a minor disagreement that will be forgotten by next week. But something has shifted. A warning has been given, a line has been drawn, and a pattern is about to begin, one that will repeat itself again and again, each time louder, messier, and harder to ignore. This was the first no. There were still 9 left. If this story were a workplace disaster documentary, this would be the part where everyone gets introduced, right before everything falls apart. First, Moses. He is the messenger nobody takes seriously. He always shows up before the problem becomes obvious, which historically is the worst possible timing. He doesn't exaggerate. He doesn't dramatize. He just delivers warnings in a calm, almost inconvenient way, the kind of calm that makes people assume nothing bad is actually going to happen. Then there's Pharaoh. On paper, he's the most powerful man in the region, absolute authority, endless resources, total control. In practice, he has one critical flaw. He is spectacularly bad at admitting mistakes. His greatest skill isn't leadership or strategy. It's confidently learning absolutely nothing. If stubbornness were a renewable energy source, Egypt would never run out of power. Next to Moses stands Aaron, his brother and official spokesperson. Not because Aaron is especially loud or dramatic, but because someone has to explain the chaos without sounding like a threat. Aaron's job is simple: translate divine warnings into sentences that don't immediately get everyone executed. And then there's the Egyptian people. They don't get speeches, they don't get choices. They're just there going about their lives, assuming the people in charge know what they're doing. They're background characters trapped inside someone else's bad decision-making arc. From Pharaoh's perspective, the situation still looks manageable. Moses is just one man with a request. A strange request, sure, but nothing worth disrupting an entire system over. The request itself is simple. Let the people go. No violence, no demands for compensation, just freedom. The refusal is just as simple. No. And here's the real problem. Neither side can back down without losing everything they believe matters. If Pharaoh agrees, he loses control, authority, and the illusion that he is untouchable. If Moses walks away, the warning becomes meaningless. This isn't a negotiation. It's a standoff built entirely on pride. Pharaoh treats the warning the same way modern leaders treat critical alerts, by silencing them and assuming the issue will resolve itself. Moses becomes that employee who keeps saying, "This is going to be a problem," while everyone else rolls their eyes and checks their calendar. And then the system breaks. Without fanfare or build-up, something basic stops working. The Nile, the lifeline of Egypt, turns into blood. Water becomes unusable. Fish die. The most essential resource in the country suddenly fails. This is not dramatic symbolism anymore. This is logistics. The problem immediately leaves the palace. It moves into the streets, then into the markets, then into people's homes. Buckets, wells, cups. Everything reflects the same message. Something is very wrong. For the first time, the warning has consequences. And yet Pharaoh still believes this is a one-time issue, an isolated incident, an unfortunate coincidence that will clear up if he waits long enough. He convinces himself that this doesn't require change, just patience. From the outside, Egypt is still standing. Pharaoh is still in charge. The system hasn't collapsed. But a line has been crossed. This is no longer a conversation. It's a pattern beginning to form. And Pharaoh still thinks this is only the beginning of nothing. By now, a pattern has formed. And it's not subtle. Moses shows up. He delivers the warning. Pharaoh refuses. Something terrible happens. Pharaoh panics, promises to change, and then completely forgets the promise the moment the discomfort stops. This cycle will repeat so often it becomes almost impressive. First come the frogs. Not a reasonable number of frogs. Not a, wow, nature is weird amount of frogs. This is a full invasion. Frogs in houses, frogs in beds, frogs in food, frogs in places that should legally never contain frogs. Egypt briefly turns into the world's worst wildlife documentary, one that nobody asked for and nobody can turn off. Pharaoh finally reacts. He begs for it to stop. He agrees to everything, anything. Make the frogs go away, they do. And the second the situation improves, Pharaoh resets emotionally. The promise disappears. The answer is back to no. Then things get smaller and worse. Plague 3 arrives as tiny insects, lice, gnats, something itchy and impossible to escape. They're everywhere. On skin, on clothes, on animals. The experts step in to explain it and fail completely. This is the moment when the illusion of control starts to crack. Even the professionals quietly admit, yeah, we've got nothing. Pharaoh still refuses. Plague 4 escalates the chaos with flies, thick, relentless, city-stopping swarms. Streets become unbearable, markets shut down, and for the first time, a strange detail becomes impossible to ignore. The Israelites aren't affected. One side lives normally, the other side lives inside a buzzing nightmare. People notice. Pharaoh notices too, briefly. He negotiates, half measures, temporary solutions. Anything that avoids actually letting go. The flies leave. The promise expires, the cycle continues. Then the damage turns expensive. Plague 5 strikes the livestock. Animals drop dead across the land. Cattle, horses, herds, gone. This isn't just uncomfortable anymore. This hits transportation, food supply, trade, wealth. The economy takes a direct hit. Numbers don't lie, and the numbers are getting ugly. Israelite livestock? Fine. Pharaoh checks, confirms, and still refuses. At this point, the problem is no longer theoretical. It's measurable. Then Plague 6 removes all remaining ambiguity. Painful boils break out on people. Not symbolic pain, not distant loss, personal, physical suffering. Even Pharaoh's own officials are affected. The same people who once stood confidently beside him now can't even stand upright. The body has entered the conversation, and still, Pharaoh holds on. He promises change when the pain peaks. He withdraws it when the pain fades. He learns, then immediately unlearns, over and over again. But something new is happening beneath the surface. The Egyptian people are starting to connect the dots. They see the pattern clearly now. Moses isn't the problem. The warnings aren't random. The disasters follow decisions, and the one constant in every collapse isn't the messenger, it's the refusal. Pharaoh still believes this can be managed, that it's just another phase, another crisis that will pass if he waits long enough. But the tone has shifted. This is no longer chaotic inconvenience. This is structured collapse, and the worst part hasn't even arrived yet. At this point, the noise starts to fade, not because things are getting better, but because everyone is getting tired. The chaos no longer feels shocking, it feels exhausting. Egypt has moved past panic and into something heavier, dread. People don't ask if something bad is coming anymore. They ask how bad it will be this time. And then it hits again. This time it falls from the sky. A violent storm rolls in, but it's not just rain, it's hail. Massive, destructive hail that smashes crops, shatters trees, and tears through anything left standing. Fields that survived earlier disasters are wiped out in minutes. The damage is obvious, loud, and impossible to deny. For the first time, some Egyptians actually listen. They take the warning seriously. They move animals inside. They try to prepare. And for a moment, it looks like Pharaoh might finally be learning something. The storm passes. The destruction remains. Pharaoh apologizes. Again. He admits fault. Again. He promises change. Again. And then, when the danger is gone, he does exactly what he's done every single time before. Nothing. So what little survived doesn't survive for long. The next wave arrives quietly but efficiently. Locusts cover the land, consuming every remaining plant. Anything green disappears. Anything edible vanishes. Whatever hope Egypt had of recovery is eaten in front of them. This isn't dramatic anymore. It's final. Pharaoh reacts the same way he always does. Urgency followed by regret. Regret followed by reversal. He agrees. He hesitates. He pulls back. The cycle refuses to die even as everything else does. Then the world goes dark. Not metaphorically. Literally. A thick, heavy darkness settles over Egypt. No movement, no work, no direction. People stay where they are because there's nowhere to go. Time stretches. Silence replaces panic. The entire country freezes in place. And still, Pharaoh resists. By now, the irony is unavoidable. The most powerful leader in the world can't control the weather, the land, the animals, or even the light. His authority exists only in his own mind. And yet, when given the last chance to stop, he refuses. So the final consequence arrives without spectacle. No storms, no noise. No warning signs filling the sky. Just silence. The 10th blow doesn't strike Egypt as a system. It strikes it personally, household by household. Loss that can't be negotiated away. Pain that can't be undone by changing one's mind afterward. This is the moment everything collapses. The refusal that once felt strong now feels empty. The power that once seemed absolute proves fragile. The cost of saying no finally becomes undeniable. There is no victory here, no celebration, no triumph. Only consequence. A long chain of ignored warnings leads exactly where it always does, to a point where nothing can be taken back. And when the silence settles, Egypt is no longer the place it was at the beginning of this story. Because the final lesson is clear even if it arrived too late. Control was never the same thing as strength. This was never a sudden punishment. It wasn't a random explosion of chaos that came out of nowhere. It was a sequence. A slow, methodical chain of warnings, each one clearer than the last, each one offering a chance to stop before things went further. Every plague was a pause button, a moment to rethink, a moment to adjust, a moment to say, okay, that's enough. And every time the answer stayed the same. No. Looking back, the pattern is almost uncomfortable in how familiar it feels. Something breaks. The damage becomes impossible to ignore. Promises are made in desperation. relief arrives. And the moment the pressure lifts, everything resets back to how it was before, as if nothing had been learned at all. Each plague wasn't just destruction, it was information. Water turning to blood was a warning. Frogs overrunning homes were a warning. Insects, flies, disease, loss, pain, darkness, all warnings. Each one said the same thing in a different way. This path isn't sustainable. But the danger was never making a wrong decision once. Anyone can do that. The real danger was insisting on the same decision even after the cost became obvious, even after the consequences became personal, even after the system started collapsing around it. By the end, Egypt doesn't fall because of a single disaster. It falls because of accumulated refusal, because of pride stretched too far, because of control mistaken for strength. And that's why this story still works thousands of years later. Because it's not really about ancient plagues. It's about patterns humans repeat constantly. In companies that ignore internal warnings until they collapse. In governments that double down instead of course correcting. In relationships where one side keeps insisting everything is fine, while everything is quietly falling apart. Most collapses don't start with catastrophe. They start with confidence. They start with someone saying, "Relax, I've got this under control," and then saying it again, and again, and again, until there's nothing left to control. By the time Pharaoh finally changes his answer, the cost has already been paid. The lesson arrives too late to prevent the damage. What remains isn't victory or defeat, just consequence. And that's the quiet ending of this story. Not a dramatic explosion, not a celebration, just the realization that every ignored warning eventually adds up. So here's the question that lingers after the silence settles. After which plague would you have stopped everything? And at what point did Pharaoh no longer have a way back?